across these cases, is there a moment that jumps out to you as the most surprising, the most indelible?
I'm not sure that I've ever seen a defendant walk out, or a party to a litigation walk out of court in the middle of a lawyer's summation. So that was surprising, though I will say that given his behavior in the preceding week, it wasn't totally shocking, but that was surprising. You know, the jury verdict in the first case where they held him liable for the actual underlying assault, that was a great surprise, but it was surprising. And then, frankly, the fact that he just went right back to it the next day, I guess I probably shouldn't have been surprised, but we were.
Of course. I want to play that sound that we're trying to play earlier from E. Jean on Rachel Maddow.
We are doing this for women around the country who have been knocked down repeatedly. And so it's really not about me anymore. We have moved beyond me. And as you say, the fight now is really to take back our future. This is a man who stacked the Supreme Court, took away women's rights over their own bodies. We would like to be a part of turning our eyes to the future and taking back our rights.
There's a much bigger fight here, right? In as much as this is about E. Jean Carroll, it is about women and survivors all across this country. In as much as it is about the way in which Donald Trump defamed E. Jean Carroll, it is also about the man's relationship to power.
For sure. And, you know, I think one of the themes in the first trial, the sexual assault trial, there was a lot of discussion and argument by Trump's lawyers and cross-examination of E. Jean on the stand about sort of what we call the perfect rape victim, and how there's an expectation about how a woman who has been sexually assaulted should behave. She should scream. She should call the police. She should never speak publicly about it. She should never be happy again. She should never try to be successful again. And they used the fact that E. Jean didn't quite fit that mold as a way of telling the jury, you shouldn't believe her. And the jury rejected that. And I hope that that was a really big lesson for women, for men, for anyone who is worried about coming forward because their story isn't, quote unquote, perfect.
Well, and there was the really gross argument that they made this time around that she somehow did this for want of fame.
Yeah, there was that. We called that the "she asked for it" argument, which was a big theme of Alina Habba's closing. You know, she's better off now. She's more well known now. She wanted this. And yeah, I mean, it's very offensive. Like, yeah, maybe more people know her now, but way more people hate her.
Yeah, and not in the way she wanted to be known. I want to bring into our conversation senior editor for Bloomberg Opinion and MSNBC political analyst Tim O'Brien, and former assistant U.S. attorney and MSNBC legal analyst Glenn Kirshner. Tim, what's got to be going through the former president's head just these past few days? Is he chastened?
$88.3 million is a lot of money. That is what's going through his head, because his head is basically a cash register. And he sees everything in the world through the prism of money. You know, he only has really two lenses that he understands things through. It's either self-aggrandizement or self-preservation. And this case, in which three women took him and his lawyer to the cleaners through a very effective, judicious, and determined use of the court system, has got to utterly rankle him, because as Sean Cawley noted, they didn't know how his court antic might play out, but it ultimately didn't convince the jury. And I think there's a lesson in there, a long-term lesson in there, that the ultimate jury that's going to be dealing with Donald Trump this fall are voters. And I think if voters have the fact pattern put in front of him, his history put in front of them, the dangers he presents, in this case to women, in other cases to national security, and to democracy and the Constitution, juries will go the right way around this. And it does show that the rule of law does matter. And I think in this case specifically, you know, Donald Trump has historically been a skirt chaser of the most ruthless and vicious sort. There's been much talk of how he empowers women in his businesses, but in most of his life, he treats them like arm candy and essentially sees them as dispensable. And I think he probably went into this case thinking that he could power through it with bravado, machismo and performance art. And Sean Crowley and Robbie Kaplan and E. Jean Carroll schooled him. And it rankles in terms of his, I think, sense of self. It rankles in terms of his wallet. And I just don't see him keeping quiet for any meaningful length of time. And in that context, I think E. Jean Carroll should see Donald Trump as an annuity. And every time he opens his mouth in coming months and years, she can sue him again and get more money, and it can continue to fund her retirement, her good causes, and keeping people on notice that Donald Trump shouldn't be allowed to get away with things like that.
Sean, are you psychologically prepared for that?
Let's talk about that next week.
Okay. Yeah. Let's give the woman a week. Glenn.
Yeah, sorry, Sean. I didn't mean to impress you into duty again.
It's okay.
I do think there's a bigger point here too, Glenn, which is, George Conway, he wrote in his piece that we quoted, the jury saw Trump for who he really is, and they showed that no one is above the law, which sure matters as it relates to Donald Trump, but it also matters as it relates to faith in these institutions, right?
Yeah, they sure did see Trump for who he is. Is it a coincidence that when he chooses not to appear, when the jury is not exposed to Donald Trump firsthand in a courtroom, they award E. Jean Carroll $5 million. When he does appear, they award E. Jean Carroll $83.3 million. I love that Ms. Crowley said that one of the sort of memorable or even shocking moments was during closing arguments, which are usually a pretty solemn affair. When we think about the fact that every court in the land, really in every jurisdiction, has rules against disrupting the proceedings. And as they were arguing to the jury that Donald Trump is a liar who seems to believe the rules don't apply to him, what does he do? Jumps up and, leaves court in a huff, doing what? Disrupting the proceedings. That's a litigator's dream when an opponent behaves like that. I probably would have said, ladies and gentlemen, I would love to invite Mr. Trump back into the courtroom, slap an exhibit sticker in his head, because he is exhibit one, proving precisely the point we were arguing to you. So, it is good that not only the institutions held, but, what was done to Ms. Carroll years ago, and then what was done more recently with this, relentless, incessant defamation. Donald Trump has been held to account for all of it, and I do hope that emboldens others who are victim of sexual, offenses, who are hesitant to come forward for all sorts of reasons that we all know too well.
Tim, I think about the argument that Sean just shared with us that she had shared with the jury, but there's one thing that Donald Trump cares about, and that is money. And that seems particularly relevant given the ruling that we are waiting for in the civil fraud trial, right? That could actually be the greatest undermining of his wealth and of, as he would say, his brand.
Right. That case could have damages of as much as $370 million. It's a civil fraud trial. I doubt the judge will go that high, but who knows? Donald Trump has routinely disrespected judges in the courtroom in every venue. He's disrespected the process in every venue. I can't imagine a judge would be predisposed to be lenient on Donald Trump given those circumstances, but one doesn't know. But nearly $460 million in financial penalties is gargantuan. Trump is worth around, conservatively say, $3 billion. He plays hide and go seek with most of his debts. His wealth is tied up in very illiquid assets, urban real estate properties in downtown locations that have been slammed by COVID and vacancies because of that, plus a clutch of golf courses. Most of that stuff he can't just turn around and sell tomorrow. He maybe has $600 million or so in cash that he would have to dip into. And let me tell you, Donald Trump does not like doing that. He is probably going to try to find every avenue he can to avoid it. But at the end of the day, I imagine he's going to have to pay up a significant amount. And if he doesn't pay it, then people like Sean Crowley and Robbie Kaplan can attach his assets and begin collecting.
Sean, here's my big question for you, which is there are prosecutors across this country who are trying cases, some of them criminal, against Donald Trump. What is your counsel to them? What is it you learned being in the courtroom with him, successfully trying multiple cases against him? what do other attorneys need to learn from the success of these cases?
So I've been asked that question a couple of times, and I've been thinking about it. I think there are really two things, and they don't really need to hear from me because they're very experienced prosecutors who've had some experience with Donald Trump. But I think there are two things. One is there's no trick that he won't try to play, no matter how seemingly far-fetched or frankly dirty at times. He will try it, and he may have lawyers who will go along with him. The other is, though, and this was somewhat of a surprise to me being in the courtroom with him for the first time, that when he's stripped of, the press or the TV cameras and rally and his supporters, he's just a guy, and he can be controlled. Putting aside some of the antics that we've just talked about, by and large, Judge Kaplan controlled him. He controlled the courtroom. And made him follow the rules. He testified. He was only allowed to answer 3 questions from his attorney. The judge cut him off twice. He's just a guy, and he may not think so, but he's actually bound by the same rules and the same laws as we all are.
Sex. Relinquish what remains of the Allspark.
So who's the insect? You? What? Who's the insect?
Protect you. They were defeated on our world, and we will defeat them here.
This was just a diversion! Security, please bring up. Rabbit, she's already inside. Deeds! Give me an update on that reserve. Boss readiness. What was his name? What was it?
Evac, sir.
Evac.
She's right in front.
We are facing a heavy, sustained attack. They appear to be after the All-Star. Stand down.